So I want to give an update on all things Indian Point, our advocacy efforts, discussions with the state, discussions with our elected officials, and at the end of the presentation, I'll turn it over to Enrique to talk about multi-year revenue and expense projections. So we had our most recent sort of formal update in the late fall in November, giving an update on what we knew at the time. And we started that conversation, as we start many of our conversations here and in our publications, of reminding everyone who we are. And this is our most updated 2018-19 infograph, highlighting all of the various successes in our district. And we certainly could do 10 of these to make sure we capture more of our successes. But we use this as a reminder, because sometimes we get stuck in the mud and dealing with state mandates or Indian Point or all of the crazy things that happen in public education. We have done and continue to do very, very well in terms of turning taxpayer dollars and opportunities into exciting outcomes. And last week alone, the high school again was recognized as the top school in New York State. Earlier this year, actually just a few months ago, for the second year in a row, and only the second school in the state were recognized by Project Lead the Way. What we have achieved and our plans to continue to achieve is nothing but outstanding. And we have a legit reality check with Indian Point. Back in January 2017, Indian Point abruptly announced that they were going to close. And while many people ran around with their hair on fire, this is for you.
No, I'm going to have to listen to it.
Oh, that's even better. You can rewind and hear me more often.
Sorry.
All right.
Thank you.
Rather than run around and light our hair on fire, we wanted to be thorough. We wanted to have all of the information. We wanted to network with our state agencies, our advocacy groups, and especially our politicians. The reality is, over the course of the remaining years of our pilot, which is a financial agreement with Indian Point that runs through the year 2025, we will lose, in air quotes, $60.5 million. And Enrique and I really quickly did a back-of-the-envelope calculation and said, if we need $60.5 million, and the only place to get it is through taxes, what would our tax increases be to recover this loss? And on average, it was 13% each year for the duration of that time. So 13%, another 13, another, and another. And we realized that that was not an option, and that was a non-starter, and we began, very quickly and aggressively with advocacy efforts. And what did we do? We did a lot of learning, and we had a lot of conversations. We learned that the New York State has a cessation mitigation program. We'll get into that in a minute. We know that there is a great deal of potential business development in our school district. We had the town's oh my goodness, Chris Kehoe, I forget his title. He essentially is responsible for development. He came and presented at a board meeting around this time in November of 2018 about all of the potential opportunities and who the town was speaking with to try to bring business development. Why is that important? Because if we have businesses that move into our district or that turn vacant property into opportunities, those properties then are taxed and assessed at a higher level. That offsets property taxes to a homeowner. House of Representatives, Nita Lowy has sponsored a series of bills while she was in the minority party. Now that she's in the majority party, she's actually the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, which is a very big deal for us here in Westchester and in the area she represents. We'll talk about her advocacy efforts. We know that the state education department will increase our state aid. It will go up by the millions. And we'll talk about what that forecast looks like toward the end of this presentation. But as Indian Point slows down, the overall wealth of our school district decreases. What that means is that the state's supplemental contribution to our annual budget increases. It usually takes about 2 years for the state to catch up with what they owe us, but it is a financial commitment the state must make based on the education foundation formulas. It's not a if, it's a when. So what will happen is just a matter of how quickly. And lastly, a sundry of district cost savings initiatives that we have been talking about and that we'll continue to talk about into the years to come. So the Cessation Mitigation Program. This essentially is a pot of money that sits in Albany that currently has approximately a $45 million balance, and that taxing jurisdictions, those are essentially school districts, towns, villages, counties, anyone who assesses a tax can apply for these funds. You have to have a tax loss of 20% or greater, and you receive this fund over 7 years. So we are eligible for around $64 million of cessation funds over a 7-year period. All right. The point and the rationale of the cessation fund is to level off and to mitigate any huge tax increases to property owners. All right. So it's a way of slowing down major increases so that you can actually plan and have a multi-year financial projection. All right. As I said earlier, without any other revenue coming to the district, our taxes would go up on average 13% each year for 5 years. That was before we understood anything about the cessation mitigation program. So this is a very important initiative for us to advocate for, because the majority of the makeup in revenue will come from this. This is a law. This is on the books. And in the last 14 months, and we should be very, very proud of this, the last 14 months, due to our advocacy efforts and partnering with a number of organizations and non-for-profits and pounding our politicians, $45 million is the current balance. We advocated for $34 million in the last 14 months. So before we got involved, the balance was $11 million. So thanks to our current and former state senator, thanks to our current state assemblywoman, our participation on a number of task forces with the governor, but also through the town of Cortland, our advocacy efforts are responsible for $34 million of that $45 million current balance, and we still have work to do. In fact, the legislature, New York State Legislature, is still in session. They're in session until the end of June, and they're debating how much more money will be put into that fund, not only on this year's basis, but on a future basis, a guaranteed increase to the fund. Right now what's being debated is $10 million every year, basically forever, so that the mitigation fund always is solvent, always has enough funds in it for all of the taxing jurisdictions that need the funds that they qualify for. So that's really good news, but we still have work to do. Business development, I talked a little bit about this back on November 28th. Chris Kehoe came. He talked about the potential that when Indian Point sells and goes through its decommissioning process, that there are parcels of the 240-acre Indian Point campus that very well could be subdivided, sold, and repurposed for business development. For the longest time, Indian Point was not interested in that because they knew they had to sell the plant. All right? It's no different than selling your home. If you have a home with 5 acres, you want to sell. The Indian Point's position is we want to sell the home and all 5 acres. We're not interested in selling an acre here, an acre there, when we know the home is going to be for sale. So Indian Point said, we hear you. We know you want us to sell you property so you can go forward with business development. We need that property so we can sell to a decommissioning company. That was announced earlier in April. And essentially what that means is think of selling your home. Indian Point has decided to sell their home, and the deal will take place in 2 years. But they have a buyer, it's under contract, and it's binding. We just have to hurry up and wait 2 years. So the conversation about Indian Point site development will now be a conversation we'll have with the company that bought it, which is named Holtec. So Holtec's responsibility is to determine what sort of footprint they need on that 240-acre campus in order to go through the decommissioning process. And we hope that whatever property they don't need, that also could be used for business development, they'd be interested in selling off, and then the town or the village or the state would help us find a potential buyer and would help us bring some business development there, which creates new businesses onto the tax rolls that minimizes any huge increase to the taxpayer. The riverfront development, Mr. Kehoe talked about opportunities of business development around little boutique shops and restaurants down on the waterfront, opportunities around family entertainment, being able to kayak and rent water sport activities, those sort of things. The train station, there's a lot of available property at the Cortland train station, again, looking at the potential for restaurants or pubs or bistros, those sort of things. And then they're also looking at every other available parcel that is in the town of Cortland, but maybe not necessarily in their school district. So that is a big advocacy effort. Potential acts of Congress. So Nita Lowy proposed these 4 bills, and I won't read all of them, but basically what they do is it creates a revenue by the federal government paying us and the town and the village a fee for housing the federal government's spent fuel rods. All right, think of it as opportunity lost. Because the federal government's rules are that when you close a nuclear power plant, you have to keep the spent fuel on campus, which means you can't really build within a radius of where the spent fuel is. Nita Lowy's proposal is to say, look, that's on the federal government to reimburse these communities, because the opportunity lost is they can't redevelop that property. So it's essentially a tax that would come out of the federal coffers that control the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC. So these are in committee. The good news, and I'll talk politics for a minute, the good news is this isn't your typical proposal from a blue state Democrat or your proposal from a red state Republican. The majority of active nuclear power plants are in traditional Republican states. And the reason that's important is because this really is a bipartisan effort. That this isn't about Democrats and Republicans, it's wherever a nuclear power plant is, they have a shelf life of around 30 years. It's eventually going to close, and that community, whether it's in Texas, Oklahoma, Arizona, Nevada, New York, or Massachusetts, is going to be faced with exactly what we're faced with. A huge campus, a huge plot of land that can't be redeveloped because of federal guidelines saying the spent fuel has to stay there. So we receive updates every couple months from the Congresswoman's staff. All of these bills are still alive and they're still being debated. So we hope that if one or any of them pass and get through the House and get through the Senate and is approved by the President, that will be some significant unanticipated revenue that we're not accounting for now, and that would be a really good thing. We talked a little bit about the state education department. We know that our state aid will increase. This is really important because right now we receive around 10% state aid. That could go as high as 30%, but that's all based on the calculation from Albany. But Enrique and his friends have been having those conversations. Earlier tonight we had a gentleman say, okay, all this is nice and you're crossing your fingers and you hope for the money tree to blossom, but what are you doing to tighten your belt? And we have been, I think, pretty clear and pretty upfront that after debating what to do about Indian Point, after studying all the other financial and revenue threads, we also learned that we need to go through some painstaking conversations about if and how we tighten our belt. So back in the summer, the board had a retreat for 2 nights, and one of the major outcomes of the retreat was to commence a series of cost analysis studies. aimed at how do we put a dollar sign and a dollar value on some of our programs. At the high school, we're looking at electives. We have outstanding elective programs, probably some of the best in the county and therefore in the state. But they're electives, they're not mandated. It will be an analysis that essentially will tell us how much money is the district spending on some of these elective programs that the state doesn't mandate. And how much money are we spending on programs with low course enrollment. I grew up speaking French. I travel to France when I can. I like to pretend I can speak French when I'm there. We offer French throughout our system, and because of staffing and because of opportunities that this board has provided, we offer AP French. And sometimes we offer AP French to a handful of kids. Great opportunity. It's a commitment we made to kids and parents to say, if you stick with the language, we have a capstone opportunity, which is college level, AP French. But it's costly to provide AP French for 5 kids. It's costly to provide Project Lead the Way, and we are a state-recognized school. It's costly to provide a lot of programs, and we owe it, the commitment from our team and the board is to say, we owe it to the community to at least put a dollar sign on it. Now, we may not touch it, and we may say, no way, some of these things are off limits, but we at least have to go through the process of doing the analysis to turn the stone over. No decision has been made. No decision will be made without public input. And the cost analysis isn't even done. So I'll talk a little bit about the status and the folks that are doing it. In the middle school, they're looking at how we organize kids. Right now we have a team approach where kids move with a core set of teachers in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. We're modeled that way for a lot of reasons. One reason is it's a very social and emotional appropriate way of organizing kids in the middle school. A group of teachers in math, science, English, and social studies share about 85 to 120 kids. They have common planning time. They have an opportunity to talk about kids' needs. They have an opportunity to talk about social emotional needs, curriculum needs. It's a really beneficial model for kids to have a community in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. There are middle schools who don't have that philosophy, and it's called a junior high model. It's essentially 7th and 8th grade is organized like high school. The teachers don't belong to a team, they belong to a content. So instead of having a team in 7th grade or a team in 8th grade, kids just bounce back and forth to their teachers based on their schedule. There isn't that social emotional component. There is a cost to that, because when you have dips in enrollment, or you have an opportunity to go to a junior high model, you have strength in numbers, because you're dividing fewer kids over more teachers, and the way that you would save money would be through attrition, hopefully. But essentially in the junior high model, it's more efficient. You need less staff to teach the curriculum. Also at the middle school, the analysis will look at state mandated programs and courses. Again, we offer a whole host of electives to kids in middle school that are way above and beyond state mandates in terms of art and music and computers, technology. We have Project Lead the Way courses, or Project Lead the Way strands in 7th and 8th grade for kids to prepare them for the program in high school. Those are great programs, and not all of them are mandated, and we owe it to the community to say, before we hike up taxes double digits, we have to put a value on this. And at the elementary level, this is perhaps the where the report will be the most thorough. We have to look at how we are organizing 3 elementary schools that house around 900-ish kids. Do we redistrict to balance enrollment? Because right now, Frank G is a little over 400 kids. VV is around 400 or 330 to 340. And Furnace Woods hovers around 240 to 250. Those are very, very ideal elementary sizes, but it's very, very inefficient to run 3 elementary schools in the way that we currently do. The students who attend our elementary schools is a crapshoot based on who lives in what neighborhood at what age. And we cross our fingers and we hope, we love all of our kids, but we hope a certain number of kids in a certain grade level don't move into a certain neighborhood because that's expensive. And I could go back and talk about our average class size in the elementary is 19, and we'd be hard pressed to find a school district with less than 19 kids on average in the elementary school. But we also know that in kindergarten, in school A, we have 23 and 24 kids, and in kindergarten in school B, we've had 14. All right? That's a function of who lives where at what age. And that is just not an efficient way. So the study is going to determine, are there more efficient ways? Redistricting to keep 3 elementary schools, but to try to get all of the elementary schools to an equal enrollment number. And those members who have been on the board for those conversations in the past, they are not fun, because there are kids who will leave one school to go to another to solve a financial problem. Another analysis is to look at the elementary organization by grade level. All right, some people call this the Princeton plan. This is where all the kids go to all the schools and they move by grade level. And there are different versions of a Princeton plan. All right, a grade level school where they go to school A for K and 1, school B for 2 and 3, school C for 4 and 5. Some districts, like Yorktown, have 2 primary schools, a K through 3-ish, and then they all come together 4th and 5th, and then they all move to middle school. There are different versions. If we have more kids in the same place at the same time that need the same grade level of instruction, that is the most efficient way to teach kids. It's the most efficient way. That's why a high school is very, very efficient. If the high school got 50 kids that walked in there tomorrow, the existing staffing could absorb those 50 kids, because we have 6, 8, 10 teachers per department. You can spread them out over a number of teachers. If 50 kids moved into Furnace Woods right now, we would probably have a $300,000 or $400,000 problem that's not budgeted for, because that would exceed enrollment caps. We're looking at I don't know what grade level at BV, but there's a grade level, 2nd grade.
Oh, 2 grades.
Or 2 grades. We have a teacher who's moving out, a BV teacher who lives in BV. She's moving. They're downsizing, kids are out of the house, getting ready to slow down and retire. Moving out of the community. Has sold their house to a family who have 2 kids that will go to BV. And one of the children will actually put the grade level over the cap. All right, so a function of a new family coming to a district creates a $100,000 opportunity, but that is just not an efficient way to run the K through 5 operation. So the study is going to look at different ways of organizing that will create more cost-effective measures. And we'll debate that. We'll debate it here. Our team will give you information on pros and cons, what works and what doesn't, why there are more educational benefits to one area or one opportunity than another. But ultimately, it will be our decision to determine if the financial picture we're looking at warrants significant change in any of these areas that you see up on the screen. The answer could be no. The answer could be our community will reject this, and the projected tax increases based on the assumptions we have, it's just too much, and that could be the answer. We have to go through the process to arm ourselves with the information to make those decisions. And we have been talking about this at PTA meetings. We've been talking about it with our staffs. We've been talking about it at board meetings. We've been talking about it out in public. That we owe it to our community to talk about things that we have to put some dollar signs on, because we have a fiduciary responsibility. But also, no decision has been made. The group that we hired came highly recommended from the School Boards Association, from the Superintendents Association, from Enrique's Business Association, as well as BOCES. They're a team that does this for a living. They're out of Syracuse. They haven't stepped foot in our district yet. They're coming in early June. They have asked for thousands of pieces of information, from salaries to a blueprint of a school, They've asked for what programs we offer, bell schedules, specific teacher schedules. It is a very, very thorough report, and we got one shot at getting it right. So they're going to come and do a site visit and meet with us in early June. They're going to meet with the principals. They're going to walk all the buildings to make sure that their blueprints match what the actual physical space is. And they're going to, start asking a series of questions so we can drill down, so they can get to some of the analysis and recommendations.
Can you just please talk about why it is not effective to close the building? Because I have gotten calls from teachers, I've gotten calls from people in the community that are very upset. I was at a PTA meeting, and it was brought up that, there's a rumor going around that a building may be closed in the elementary. And I have always stated that's absolutely not true, so.
Given the number of kids we have currently enrolled, given the fact that the housing market has been the hottest it's ever been in our school district in the last 12 years, which is going to lead to more houses selling quicker at asking price and with the potential of more students coming. I gave the example of the family leaving with 0 kids, and now we're +2, and it's only, early May. We do not, based on enrollment right now and based on the blueprints of the 3 schools, we cannot close any elementary school and have enough space in the 2 other schools. And it doesn't matter which one you want to close. We do not have enough space to run our programs. We don't have enough space to meet the mandates. We don't have enough space, period. We don't even have enough space right now for every child to have gymnasium, phys ed class in the gymnasium. Mm-hmm. All right, so by reducing our space by 1/3 is basically a non-starter. Now, I can tell you that based on 6 years of experience here. We're going to have the professionals say that based on a whole additional set of criteria and data, because my thumb is on the scale. Right? I know that closing a school and not building on to any of the 2 remaining isn't an option. But we're going to have a third-party group whose objective also say that with much other data than I could present right now. But based on number of kids and the physical layout of the existing schools, we can't do it. Look, one of the biggest, I think, a very big regret that this district made a long time ago was selling that school, McKinley. Mm-hmm. And the worst thing that you can do from a business standpoint of a school district is to close a school and mothball it and then try to reopen it. Mm-hmm. It's the worst thing you could do because you get no state aid on it. You're paying 100% out of pocket. You got to keep the heat on, you got to keep the electric on, you have to keep insurance, you have to keep surveillance. So we have no interest in that, but we're going to have the third-party group say, for reasons we already know and 10 more, basically a non-starter.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And people that have contacted me, I hope you're watching this board meeting.
One of the latest proposals that has been discussed most recently is increasing the county sales tax. The Westchester County Legislature actually approved it to increase the sales tax from 7.375% to 8.375%. And the legislature wants to take that projected increased revenue and use it for county purposes because they believe they're going to have an operating deficit in the next couple of years. But they also want to increase the contribution to all of the school districts in the county. So if this happens and gets approved by the governor, and he's getting pressured quite a bit to do this, we would be in line for a little over $400,000 of new revenue that would help support our financial situation. And it's not just us. Every single school district in the county, based on enrollment, would receive the additional aid. Ballpark figure, $400,000 is about 1% on our tax levy. So think of it this way. The increase in sales tax has the potential to reduce taxes by a percentage or to not increase them by a percentage and still get the benefit. Now, some people have said, that doesn't make sense. You're taxing me out of one pocket and you're going to give it back to the schools in another. And while that may have the appearance of it, the calculation that the county is making is that a high number of people who don't live in the county shop in the county. And so it's actually being passed off to them. And I'll use Lisa as an example. Lisa lives on the other side of the river, all right? Lisa, I'm sure, fills up her car with gas in our county. I'm sure she stops for iced tea in our county. Sometimes we have lunch in our county. Sometimes she runs errands in our county. On a night like tonight, maybe went out to dinner in our county, all right? That's just one tiny example. We gave the example at one of the elementary schools that the vast majority of our teachers, just because they're the biggest group, vast majority of our teachers don't live in the county. But they shop here. They run to the supermarket on their way home from work. They stop for coffee. Their gas tank's on E. They fill up with gas. Connecticut, I mean, how close we are to Connecticut. They're flying out of the White Plains Airport. All of the people who fly in, literally fly in and stay in the Peekskill Holiday Inn that are contractors or consultants with Indian Point. You name it. We have a lot of people that work in the county and then turn around and leave. And if you don't believe me, ask Enrique when he's doing the reverse commute to work, because he sees all the traffic going the other way. Mary Pat is with that traffic heading down
I sat in it.
to White Plains. Yeah, and sat in it.
And tonight.
And they keep going. You know, they don't just get off at the Montrose exit. They keep going and, you know, go across the bridge or head north. So, you know, this you know, very well could be $400,000 plus of revenue that really no one anticipated, but in our case will help our situation. So it's on the governor's plate to approve it. He has until, I think, the end of June to do that in this legislative session. And it will be, I'd be surprised if he didn't, because the county has legit purposes for what they'll do with that revenue. And it certainly doesn't hurt to give a percentage of it to schools to lower the burden on the taxpayer. So that's sort of the philosophy behind it. I'll turn the rest over to Enrique to walk us through some of the assumptions. And the second to last slide is the financial projections.
Thank you, Joe. We've been working very hard on the financial projections, changing them often because as new information come in, we get good news, we get bad news, but this is as of last week. And in our projections, we decided and we agreed that we're going to leave all our programs and staff intact. That means that everything that Joe said about what the consultants are going to do, we're going to throw it to the garbage. We're keeping the school as is and the district as is. Our assumption is that we will receive about 70% of the cessation fund. Usually, you receive the percentage of what you collect from the sources out of Cortland County and us. We get, when you get taxed, 70% of your real estate taxes go to the school, and the 30% go to county, town of Portland, etc., you know, fire departments, everything else. But we get 70% of your real estate taxes. Like Joe said, we'll get about $412,000 in more money in county tax, and then the way the wealth ratio of the districts work is by looking at the assessed values, but they go 2 years back. So they are giving us next year, in 2019-20, based on the assessed value of 2017. So that's the role. You know, it takes 2 years to adjust. So I'm taking that into account when I'm looking at my multi-year projections. And
The right one. Oh, there you go.
okay. There's a lot of numbers, but I highlighted important ones. And the first one is state aid, and if you can see, state aid up until 21-22 is about $5.7 million. And then it starts jumping to 7, 9, 9, 10, and 10, based on our decreased wealth ratio. The next part that is highlighted is our sales tax that we discussed, and I just highlighted it from one year to the other one, from 1920 to 21, and then it increases with increasing consumption in the county. The next one is our fund balance, and then that's when we plug a number that is coming either from operating fund balance, from the cessation fund, or from when we pass the tax stabilization reserve. So and if you look, it goes from 1.393 million this year to about 5 million next year, then to 7, then to 12, and then it starts leveling and going down. And finally, I want you to look at the proposed budget and the increasing budget. Again, I'm assuming that we're keeping all staff and all programs. And to keep all staff and all programs, for next year we have a projection of 0.64% increase in the budget. Then we go to about the same, and then we go to 1.5, 1, and numbers that we've seen in the past going forward. And that means that our tax increases, and I just put the same for one of the other ones because I don't like to look at who pays more and who pays less. It's just increase on the tax levy. As you can see, the increase this year in average is 2.64. Next year, I'm expecting it to be in the 4s in the next 2 years, then go up to 5, 6, 6, 6, 5, and then it starts going down. Numbers that obviously will be higher than anyone else in the county, but numbers that compared to what was going on before I came here, they are not that high. In average, you would expect an increase of about 5.5% for the next 7 years. And then it will start going down we already made up what we lost in Indian Point, in the increase in the budget, so then we go down to the 3%, and then hopefully in the following years, we'll get to what it was in the last couple of years, that it's under the 2% cap. Our cap, so you look at here, our cap today is $43 million. Next year it's going to be $50 million. So if we wanted to go to the top of the cap, we could increase $7 million our tax rate and still be under the cap. And that's because every dollar that we lose in pilot payments, we can get it out of the community. But obviously, as you can see here, we're nowhere in those numbers. So yes, it's going to be hard. It's an average of about 5.5%, and this is with not cutting any programs, anything, maintaining absolutely everything that we have today. What Joe and I were talking about, and BOCES did a study. If you put the same house in Henry Hudson and in any of the other 73 but one district that is Pocantico, that house will pay between 30% more and 200% more if you put it in any of the other school districts. That means that in 5 years, when we're fully taxed, we will be paying the same as Croton, as Lakeland, and our surrounded school districts.
So this budget assumes no aid whatsoever. Is that correct?
No, this
Yeah.
budget assumes increase in state aid.
But it doesn't account for our change in wealth ratio.
Yes,
Right,
that's
because-
why if you look at the peak in 1920, we get 5.4, then it increases about 2%, then about 2%, but then increases from 5.7 to 7.4. Because our wealth ratio, we still have in 2019 a wealth ratio of, let's say, 4. Our wealth ratio will go to 3 next year, and then we need 2 more years to adjust it.
So, but I think you said the difference was anywhere between 10% reimbursement and up to 40%.
Oh, no, that's very different. That's
Okay.
that's the state ratio for the capital projects.
Okay.
It's very different. This is foundation aid,
Mm.
the other one is for capital, yes. Well, I'm expecting for the capital to go from 10 to 40%, but they are completely different.
Yeah. Okay. All right, thank you.
So we didn't assume everything. We assumed what we know is in the works and what role we could play in advocating to sort of get certain initiatives across the finish line. We'll know in 6 weeks whether or not the sales tax thing happens. It is signed by the governor. I don't see how he doesn't sign that. We'll know in 6 weeks what the mechanism is to fund the cessation fund in terms of annual increases. But in the last 14 months, we got 34 million of the 45, so that's pretty good. So I'll go back to what I talked about with these cost analysis studies. We may get to a point where looking at some of these projections, and the more we learn, we'll tweak them, where I'm not going to forecast, but one option may be thank you and we're good. Or we'll make a couple adjustments or tighten the belt, because some of these projected increases, if the assumptions become reality, is not the light your hair on fire tax scenario. And I think it's important to echo what Enrique said, and Margaret and I said it when we toured the elementaries. The deal was that when Indian Point was operating, we had a more comfortable, cost-efficient way of living. And if one side of the deal is off the table, the other side is. And we have to get accustomed to being in Westchester. Westchester is the second highest paid tax in the country, and I think, going back to the beginning of the presentation, I think it's a heck of a return on investment what kids and families get out of our school and many others in the county. And the conversation to have with our community is, are tax increases between 4% and 6% palatable, given the 20-some-odd year comfort that we've had? And to me, that's as equally as important as talking about some of the findings of the cost analysis. And when Margaret and I had that conversation with the elementary schools, they nod their head. Barbara and I were out with the seniors; they were nodding their head. It's not horrible. And what Enrique was referencing was, before the property tax cap came into play, our budget increases in this school district were anywhere between 4 and
Yeah. So one other question I have about the stabilization fund that we were allowed to open. Did we get an answer yet as to whether it's a one-shot deal or whether we can keep contributing to it over time?
Actually, we had a meeting with the state yesterday, and we're having a call with the head of the Maya Association to see how we can continue to advocate for the changes. They said they were going to go back and look at our proposals, but there was no definite.
Yeah, the phone call with the governor's team, they essentially said, yeah, good point, and we'll go back to the attorneys that wrote the language. Because the issue is, the tax stabilization reserve was an act out of the executive branch. And the operating rules within the tax stabilization are contradictory to how every other reserve works on the state education side of things. And what we were saying to them is, if this reserve could operate in a way that our SED reserves work, we're good. the board still would have to pass a resolution to move money in or out of it, but it would give us more real-time flexibility as opposed to the way that the executive team wrote it. So that's why we told them we still have too many questions to even educate our community on what to do, because the team who wrote it and said, hey, this is good news, they're starting to realize there might be some operational flaws in it in terms of unintended consequences.
So the way I look at it, it seems like before any of this happened, before any of the work we did happened, we were looking at a hockey stick. Right?
Yep.
We were looking at taxes are here now, they're gonna shoot up. But based on the work that you've done now, and if anybody correct me if I'm wrong or disagree with me, looks like we have a gradual increase so that we're easing the pain on all our community members versus, hitting them all at once.
Actually, I remember my first projections, I told Joe that we were expecting about 75 to 80% increase in the first 5 years. If you look at this, let's say at 5, forget about the compounding, it's 25%.
Yeah. It's a huge difference, and I
Huge.
think that a lot of credit
I mean,
goes
again,
to all the work
at the
that
end
you've
of the
done.
day, over time, we're losing the $24 million a year that the community has to make up. But make 24 million over 10 years is very different than making it over 2 or 3 years.
Right.
So that's why we're saying, my idea here, if you look at it, is never to go to a tax increase of more than 6%.
And that's,
That's
this
if
is
we
what
do
we
nothing.
know is
That's what I'm saying,
That-
and that's
yeah,
if we
That's without making
continue
any changes at
any
all.
changes.
The worst case scenario.
This
This
is what we
is
know
if
is
Indian
happening.
Point had not closed. The same, we have a lot of capital debt coming up. We have 40 million of capital of debt that we're paying down in the next 5 years, and we're only bringing in 18 and a half at lower rate. So just there, that's why this year our budget increase was only 0.64%, because a lot of capital money, debt money, is off our books that I don't have to pay.
But I know as well, Joe and I have had meetings with people from Buchanan and from the town of Cortland, and I think people are just like, and I'm not saying relieved, but I think they feel a little bit, calmer. The initial, I think, projections were so outrageous that everybody was petrified, and I think, you and I, back when we were doing the pilot agreement, the initial pilot agreement together, never would have foreseen this at all. And that's the sad part, but, I think people are just a little bit, there's more of a sigh of relief, but I personally, and on behalf of the board as well, would like to thank you and Joe for your efforts on our behalf, because truly, I know how much the two of you have worked, for us, and I can't thank both of you enough. And Joe, I know you've been at so many meetings, and up in Albany, and with the town of Cortland, with Buchanan, and, with everybody, and I thank you. I know how much time you've devoted. I know how much time I've devoted to meetings, and they've been very minimal compared to what, you both do. So thank you tremendously.
The most important thing that I see in all this is that last year we passed an $18.5 million capital project, knowing that Indian Point was going away in 4 or 5 years. That shows that this community cares about education, cares about the children. I'm willing to pay so they can have the best facilities, even when in 4 years something really bad is
Well, and
happening.
I think.
I think that's
yeah.
more important than anything else.
Mhm.
If we didn't have that sentiment in this community 10 years ago, we have it today.
I think that sentiment is there, but I also think, honestly, I think it's purely pragmatism. I mean, honestly, and I think the board has said this before, is that if you have a decent school system, your house will maintain its value, because that's what people want. At the end of the day, they want to make sure there's a decent school system, that their kids can get a good education, because frankly, at the end, what
Mary,
else is there?
I
What else is
totally
there?
agree with you, but you still have people
But
that they say, why don't we cut $3 of this budget today because something is happening in the future? When it's, if I don't know exactly what's happening in the future, let's continue to have the best programs, the best, and when it's time to cut, then I'll cut.
But you are,
But not
but
today.
yes and no, but to be honest, you are making, like, you're implementing savings, you're implementing certain, approaches to mitigate certain costs. And, I mean, it's not like you're just sitting here saying, oh, we'll figure it out, because it's not.
Of course not.
You've already implemented, what you can, but you're not, you're not cutting things, you're not slashing things. You're still
That's the point.
maintaining the integrity of the program, while we're being a little bit more responsible and probably a little bit more circumspect about certain expenses. You're saying, do we need this, do we need that, or maybe
No,
we can be
constantly,
a little bit less,
constantly.
maybe we can find an alternate way to accomplish this. But I think honestly, we're still maintaining the programs for the students, and at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. That these kids still, because you don't know what the future is gonna hold for these kids. So we have to prepare them for a changing world. I mean, they need these skills, they need, that are being provided, so.
And
Top to bottom,
honestly,
from the elementary level all the way up to the high school.
and honestly, I believe that the families in this school district have the best deal ever for the amount of money that they pay in taxes compared to the education the kids get. Again, I take away Pocantico, it's 250 kids, it's forget.
That's a different,
Well,
that's a world, that's
That's what I'm saying. Well, I can compare it to Scarsdale, I can compare it to Lakeland 21. I believe that when you look at how much that dollar in taxes for the school district is giving me back, I think that here you have the best dollar.
But the outcomes, you're getting tremendous outcomes. I mean, you've
That's what I'm
got
saying.
kids who are
But at
going to.
every level, Mary,
Yeah.
but the immigrants that came here without knowing the language, that they can go to Westchester Community College and they go to all these places, and on the other hand, the ones that went to Cornell and to Princeton, there's programs for everyone.
Yep.
And that, we have to also commend the people, as you said, in this community, including the seniors, when we go out and we speak to the senior citizens, they understand
Sure.
that, they've got grandchildren in this community. They have, homes that they value in this community, and, I know they're very open to listening to Joe and I when we go out and we speak to them. And the PTAs are very open, but I want to emphasize to the community that going forward, please, when it comes time, give your input to us. We welcome your input, and we want to hear how you feel, because that's the only way we're gonna know what to budget for going forward. If we have people that are going to
Sure.
say, we don't want anything to change,
Well,
then,
we've had this, and again, we've had these conversations that
yeah, but
educate
people,
yourselves and talk to
people
us.
need to hear this still,
Yeah.
because I am telling you, and you can ask anybody here, we're still getting misinformation is still out there. And again, it brings me back to the point that if people do have questions, this is the place to come to, or please get in touch again with, Mr. Hochreiter, myself, with you, I mean, we're all here to answer questions.
Barbara, this is my 12th budget for this school district.
Mhm.
And I remember since my first budget, all the comments came after the
Yeah.
board approved the budget. We didn't have one comment between January and April. For 12 years, it's been the same pattern. Between January and April, no one comes and says, I disagree. So, and then after it's over, they disagree.
So,
Well,
one thing can I just say, you know, we keep talking about the $18.5 million capital project. The state's reimbursing us for
Sure.
a bunch of that. So it's not truly $18 million out of pocket for us. So I
Yeah.
just want to clarify that. 'cause
Yes.
I think people keep talking
No
about
question
$18
about
million.
it.
That's
No.
not what we're spending.
No, what I'm expecting the state to pay is between 30 and 50% of that 18.5 million. But at the end of the day, that's the amount that we're spending in the,
Right, but we'll get reimbursed for
What
it.
we'll get.
So what we net in payment
Yes.
is
I
anywhere
agree with
between
you.
50 to 70% of that cost.
yes.
Okay.
And I want to make sure we highlight and mention all the work that we sometimes don't see. But Laura and I were just in a meeting today talking about some of our tech and HR systems moving to more digital, a digital platform that will not only save time of people pushing papers and moving them in the files, but will save a tremendous amount on overtime and other areas. And we're able to buy programs and services through BOCES, where we get an incredible amount of state aid. You've heard now for 2 years that Lisa has done her budget updates, that we have kids in districts, kids from other districts requesting to come and look at our programs. Lisa sends a team out every time to go and do an evaluation of the child and interview the school to make sure it's a appropriate fit. And if you look at some of our special ed budgets over the last number of years, the revenue has increased because of the quality of program. That too is a savings. Margaret's a leader in the region with BOCES on the Curriculum Council, talking about how we can be more cost effective, partnering with other districts for programs or consultants, or being a little more meaningful, that when teachers want to go to workshops or conferences on nights or weekends or in the summer, that they're fed through BOCES, where we get a tremendous kickback from. So, you know, everyone's tightening the belt to be a part of this. And I remember a conversation when all of this happened. I met with Enrique and Margaret at the time. Lisa and Laura weren't in their current positions, and I said, you know, I guess I'm going to be on this governor's task force, and I'm going to be on this task force, and you know, this has occupied a tremendous amount of our time, and that takes us away from other work, which means we rely on our team to get that done and stand in our place, and it's created a different pace. So you know, while we're out in front of some things, or you know, on TV at the meeting with the governor, a series of other people, including the ladies at the table, have picked up the ball and have been conscious of what our financial situation is, and has made very significant contributions to that. It's not just, you know, the big ticket items that we reduce. It's all of you know, all of the subtle little things that help make something like this projection a heck of a lot more palatable today than it was 25 months ago.
and we thank you, everybody.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
that's
Thank
where
you
we
for
are.
Such a clear and comprehensive update.
You're welcome.
We very much appreciate it.